Very good evening, everyone. How are we doing on this fine, if chilly Monday night? I can see there's been some snow falling over London today, but I'm Lucas here, Liebich here is joining us from Prague, and I had a look earlier. It's minus 10 degrees C in Prague, so it's a lot colder over there than it is there. So if you have any issues with trains not working here in London, we really have no excuse. Could we briefly have a shout out? What's your name? What club do you come from? And what club do you come from? And maybe something that you're hoping to take away from this evening's webinar, please. Just type in and let's have a bit of a shout out. There's John here from Voice of Wales, Toastmaster Club. Ask. Hi, John. Anyone else? Don't be shy. We're Toastmasters. We like to speak in Toastmaster or to type, as the case might be. Our presenters for tonight's webinar, Creativity Unleashed, is Lukáš Liebich. So Lukáš is a fellow club growth director from District 95, the wild east of Eastern Europe. And we're talking here about anything from Prague all the way up to the black steppes of Ukraine. Over tonight's webinar, I've seen a previous version of it, and I actually learned a couple of techniques that are highly transferable, not just to my club, but even in day-to-day situation or even in your workplace. Lukáš is just like me, very passionate about growing Toastmasters, bringing new opportunities for people to join a wonderful organization by building new clubs and growing our existing clubs. And he also has some interesting ideas in terms of project management techniques and so on. So let's just give him a round of applause. And I will hand over the microphone to Lukáš Liebich.
Amazing, Florian. Thank you. Thank you for such a great welcome. And hi, everyone on the webinar. It's great that you found time to attend. And what we'll be looking at today is creative problem-solving techniques. And why this is a topic? Maybe I do these techniques for different cases, for different situations, for work as well as for Toastmasters. And the idea is that at the end of today's webinar, you will have a couple of hints, a couple of ideas, or a couple of tools how to get ideas not just from your own mind, but also as you will be leading meetings with colleagues from your own Toastmaster club or from different clubs. And today we'll be focusing on getting ideas for club growth. So let's get started. Maybe one comment I have, there's not that many people today in the room, which is great, because that means whenever you have questions, feel free to jump in. You don't need to wait, don't need to hesitate, either type your question and Florian will pick it up, or you can just say something, voice your concern or any comments that you might have. Problems, it's the word of the day. And I heard different opinions or comments about the word problems. One of these comments was, it's not a problem, it's a challenge. In fact, even in our district, in a humorous speech contest, one of the contestants, her name is Vera Oraj. She's a lady, I think, in her 40s, very, let's say, laid back approach to any activity, really relaxed when it comes to any work activity. And she really didn't understand why people do not like using the word problems, calling problems in their own way, calling them as they are. And just to explain a little bit what I mean by that problems, in fact, very often led to a new creative solution. For example, if we have a look at this map, and this is not a map of European districts after Reformation, it's a map of spice routes in the 15th century. And there actually was a situation that became problematic because spices were very popular in Europe at the time. It was very prized goods. But in the mid of 15th century, these routes got cut because the Constantinople was conquered by the Ottoman Empire, and therefore spices got even more and more expensive. So countries such as France, Spain, Portugal, they had real difficulties to getting spices. They had a big problem. There was one European power at the time that were the Venetians, located in Italy, who did not have such big trouble because they already mastered dealing with these spices and dealing with these trade routes. So what they did, well, the other powers suddenly, because they couldn't find the way to Eastern Asia to travel for these spices, they were forced to take a different approach and try to seek different ways how to conduct the trade, which led into the age of discovery, different sails around Africa to India, as well as coming to discovery of America by Christopher Columbus. And in the end, the Venetians, for whom the problem was not so big, they ended up becoming historically irrelevant because it was Spain and Portugal who led the discovery efforts and who became trade superpowers in Europe. So at the end of this webinar, I would like you to love your problems, because whichever problems you might have, be it related to club growth or to anything else, you can take them as a trigger for a new innovative solution. Now, what we are going to solve. We discussed with Florian that today we are going to make the webinar conversational. So we'll have a little problem sharing session. In case of anyone of you would like to share their problem, feel free to go ahead. Feel free to type it in the chat box. And Florian will also share one of his problem, and we will be looking at this problem throughout the webinar. Florian, do you have a problem?
Yes, I do have a potential problem. My problem would be to get corporations to move more quickly when it comes to setting up a new Toastmaster club or group, as I label it, within their own offices. So not to kick into the long grass or take forever, but to move pretty quickly and get things done in a matter of weeks, not months.
Understand. And that's a very good problem to have, very clear, because you can specify it with the time and what you want them to do. So let's have a look. What are the things that we can do with this problem? For those of you who know Pulp Fiction, in fact, with this problem-solving toolbox that we will have a look at, you will be like Mr. Wolf, the person who can solve any problem quickly and get his friends and colleagues out of trouble. Now, speaking about the problems that, or maybe one more question, as a club growth director, I come across a situation, and maybe Florian, you have similar experience, that it's easy to suggest solutions, or in fact, on the internet, there are already so many solutions to all potential problems we can have with Toastmasters, with lacking membership, or a long time to starting a club, or not having enough members in our meetings. I think there even is a document that is called 236 membership ideas. But just giving these solutions to the club officers or other members in the club doesn't get required engagement, because I think in general, we as people, we commit more to our own ideas. And this is why it's useful to be able not just to give people solutions, but help them come up with solutions of their own. So in the rest of the webinar, we will look at a creativity toolbox. And what I would like to highlight is these exercises, they are not my own. I took them from different sources. The one that I would like to highlight is the book Thinker Toys. At the end of the webinar, I will also show the name of the book, and so that you can have a look at it. And in that book, there are tens of other exercises and 10 of other tools. So please take this webinar more like a tasting so that you get an idea what are the things that you can do. And if you get interested, there is way more for you to explore. Before you start, and now we are thinking about your role as a facilitator, these are the things that you should do. First, if you want to lead a group of people through the exercises, definitely try them on your own. Even if the exercises seem to be like work for pairs or work for more people, just try to walk through all these steps so that you get an idea of where the exercises can lead you. Make sure that you have some writing tools for each of the participants. One thing that I've learned is even in situations when I would expect people to bring pen and paper, often they don't, and it's better to be prepared. Flip chart, post-its, and one more thing, food always helps. I remember that in my club when we were organizing meetings, a couple of times we just got ourselves a bucket from KFC, and it kind of changed the atmosphere of the meeting from work to a dinner with friends, which helped more creative ideas to come up. Now, the first thing when we have a problem is to properly center it, to address it the right way. And there are two steps that you need to do. And the very first thing is to ask yourself, okay, you might have a problem, but what does the ideal situation look like? If I can be more specific, for example, taking Florian's case, maybe Florian, maybe now you can join me. So you were describing that in the corporate clubs, the things are not working exactly how you would imagine them to work. But can you imagine the ideal case? If there were no issues, what would it look like?
To me, the ideal case would be I meet someone from a corporation, we have an initial conversation, then things after that, they get approvals from from senior management very quickly to proceed with launching a new Toastmaster club. And secondly, teams would be arranged really quickly, funding issues would be sorted really quickly, and a date for a demonstration meeting would be available a couple of 1 week or 2 weeks at the most after I've had the initial meetings with them. So say from the initial meeting of me meeting a person face-to-face to a demonstration meeting, a 6 weeks long process is what I'd like to see.
6 weeks to demo meeting or 6 weeks to chartering?
6 weeks to a demo meeting. Getting from demo to chartering is a different challenge as I perceive it.
Understand. Perfect. So as you can see, Florian has the problem already clearly framed. So we look, it's a demo, it's an initial meeting with representatives from the corporation to a demo meeting, and that should be 6 weeks. So this is the ideal case, and that's the first step. Now, the second step is identify what is preventing the ideal situation to becoming true. And these can be different things, but now is the time to list them. So again, Florian, can you name some specific things that what are the problems? Why it's not 6 weeks from the first meeting?
I can think of a number of things. Number one, in the case of people who have no familiarity with the Toastmaster program and how Toastmaster works, the lack of knowledge, the lack of familiarity is a huge break. The second challenge is not knowing what to do. We have a manual in District 91. We have strict procedures in place. That helps, but that doesn't completely help at the same time. And the third problem, and that's the one I think is the most challenging, it's out of my control, is going to be bureaucratic hurdles within the company. When I worked in the corporate world, I still remember I wanted to send an email actually to promote Toastmasters in the local area where the company was based. I had to get to 3 people to get a rejection in the end because it was not not in line with the company values or something like that. That is something that is out of my control, but it is a problem.
Understand. Perfect. So now already in the second step, we just got way more specific about what is it that we need to address. What is it that what are the things that we need to do something about? So first is like not enough knowledge about Toastmasters, low awareness. The second is like what to do exactly, what are the steps to start a club. And the third, and as you mentioned, maybe outside your control, the bureaucratic hurdles that are there in every company or in many other companies. Well, now the last thing when we speak about centering the problem is asking ourselves the question, or maybe framing the question that will lead us toward coming up with a solution. And the question is, in what ways might I? 3 dots. So or maybe Florian, if you give an example, if speaking about those 3 points, can you form a sentence that would start with, in what ways might I?
In what ways might I make people that are unfamiliar about Toastmaster more familiar? In what ways could I provide guidance for people to set up a new Toastmaster club very quickly? And in what ways could I make it easy to gain internal approvals and overcome bureaucratic barriers?
Perfect. Very clear. You sound like a pro. You must have done this sometime before. And I think the great outcome of this very first exercise is really getting the clarity, because from my experience, not just from Toastmasters, but also from the work I do, very often it happens that I am sitting in a meeting and organized by someone else, and there are different people are leading the discussion. And at some point, it becomes obvious that different people in the meeting have different ideas of why is the reason why they are sitting in the meeting room and what is the problem they are trying to solve. So by being this specific and by writing out the statements in such a specific way, like starting sentence, in what ways might I, for example, educate potential members from a corporate club about Toastmasters, this will then direct you to the solutions that will be useful. And then not just you, but also all the other people who will be working with you on solving this problem. Getting an example from a different area, in what ways might I promote our club on Facebook in case the problem I'm trying to solve is that our social media presence is too low. I will pause now for questions. Any questions to the first exercise? Any questions, doubts, or comments? If you have, feel free to type them in or raise your voice, whichever is more comfortable for you.
If you wish to ask a question, you can do a speech request by clicking on the hands up button.
In the meantime, maybe Florian, maybe you can say what does it feel like to go through this? As I was asking you these questions, how did you feel like?
I mean, this is the second time I'm seeing your webinar, Lucas, but it's quite helpful because you're starting to break things down into detail, basically. So you're going from something that is very vague to something that is far more specific and suddenly far more achievable, because it's basically a challenge made up of much smaller parts that you have far more control over. So I just think it's definitely an interesting process to gain some granularity, obviously, on things.
Right, and thanks for the comment. In fact, this is one of the keys is to have, when you have a vague problem, just to divide it into smaller parts, into smaller pieces that would allow listing you action steps, because if you have on one side having a problem, it's something that's might be difficult to do something about, but dividing it into smaller parts, it allows us to decide, okay, well, for this I can take this action, and that's the key to solving any problem, to take action in order to solve it. So thanks for pointing this out. This was helpful. All right, I believe we can continue to the next exercise. And the next exercise is called stretching the problem. What is this about? You might be familiar with Mr. Henry Ford, and this is one of his most famous quotes. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And what this means is that sometimes when we are facing a problem, when there's something that we see as a difficulty, we immediately try to solve it because we do not feel comfortable around problems, or at least when I speak for myself, when there is a problem, I don't want problems to be around for too long. But this kind of forces us to, well, focus only on the solution of the problem. And the exercise of stretching the problem, it gives you an opportunity to take a couple of steps back and for a moment think about whether the problem you are trying to solve is really the core, the big problem, or maybe you're just trying to solve one of these symptoms, whereas the problem would remain hidden. And how you do that. Here are the list of steps that you can take. Stretching the problem. So step number 1, write down the challenge or the statement of the problem, the thing that we did in the previous exercise. Then as the next step, ask yourself, why do you want to do it? Why do you want to solve this problem? What does this bring to you? And then repeat 5 times. How exactly this would look like. Let me show you. For example, as we had a discussion about promoting a club on Facebook, my problem is, or well, the action I want to take is I want to find better ways to promote our club on Facebook. But why did I decide to do this? Why this is the one thing that I want to do? Well, because I want to attract more guests to our club meetings. All right, and why is this important? I want to have bigger audience in our club meetings. And why is bigger audience important? Because bigger audience will be more motivational and more challenging to present to, because we are in Toastmasters to practice public speaking. We need to have some real public. Why is that important? Particularly because in my club, I want members, because we are business professionals, I want to prepare them for presenting at conferences. And it's important so they get the feeling of a bigger crowd to present to. And why do I want to do that? Because there are already some advanced members who have this need, and if they do not get this need satisfied, then they will probably leave the Toastmaster Club because they will just look for the practice opportunity somewhere else. And what this results after going through all these steps is that what I really want to do, what is important for me, is to keep engagement of more advanced members. Interestingly, and I believe that you would agree with me, if you think about it, there are probably more ways how to keep engagement of more advanced members, maybe better ways than improve our Facebook advertising. And this is exactly what this exercise does. It leads you through different layers, different layers of your need. lets you take a step back and lets you think about what it is that is really important for you, what it is that you really want to do. And in all of these layers, you can take a side step and you can start finding solution for the new problem that you have discovered. Now, let's have a look and let's try. Your turn. In this case, Florian's turn. Florian, are you okay to do this live, to go through, through these different steps?
Yeah,
One, two, three, four.
that's not a problem. So
Yeah.
I just stated the problem as, to more simply, I want to turn corporate club leads into pre-charter clubs quickly, which is basically what I want. Why do I want to do that? The first time I had, because I want more certainty over the time frames. Why? Because I want to see where I am able to help. Why? And this is where things can go in two different directions. I feel.
Yeah.
Because it can go into because I want to see how I can make things faster, or the other one would be I want to see where I can. I mean, it's a tricky one because there's a risk of it becoming a circular argument, because I can say I want to see where I can best help. Why? Because I want to help making things faster, which is a different problem to the first one, but very similar at the same time.
Yeah, completely agree. And again, so as you mentioned, that you can come back to the beginning of the circle, and that's completely true. Is what happens with this exercise sometimes. And what I'd like to point out is that in this exercise, as well as with all the others, well, the idea, what this should help you with, the exercise is not a solution on its own. It's just a tool that helps you come up with new ideas, different ideas, and get a perspective. So, for example, when you said, like I think in the third step is that you want to find a way, or you want to identify a spot where you can help most, right? And I think that's really an interesting question, interesting problem to look into on its own, because there has only 24 hours, and there are some things that you as club growth director can do best, and there are some things that either someone else can do, or when they do not get done at all, that's not such a big problem as well. So yeah, thanks for walking through this. And any questions or any comments beside the circular point?
No, not at this stage. I mean, what I'm going to do actually is I am going to go through this exercise in my own time, maybe potentially tomorrow. Actually, I'll just get some flip chart paper and put it on the wall, because this is actually quite powerful in focusing you. And this is something where, as leaders, I sometimes feel that we get so much thrown into the deep end of small scale things, of the day-to-day things, of flows of emails between us and founders and area directors, that we actually forget the bigger picture sometimes. And this is where things can get sidetracked quite easily. But at the same time, my philosophy as club growth director is, and we're pretty similar in that respect, Lucas and I, is to empower people on their own. So that means helping where necessary and giving people the tools. So not giving them a fish, but teaching them how to fish, or giving them a fishing rod, basically.
Right.
But now it's something I've got to do again with more time.
I definitely agree. Maybe one comment I would like to add to this exercise: is great to do it on your own, because it helps you clarify your own thinking. And the benefit of doing this with others, for example, with other members of your club or other people in your area, is that when you do this all together, and you all together ask yourselves these questions, why, then you had this added benefit of getting an alignment of, okay, why are we doing this? Why we as a club want to get these 5 new members by the end of March to finish the Talk Up Toastmasters membership campaign. Why is this so important for us? And because clearly, when we are thinking on our own, we might differ in the reasons and in the motivation. Walking through this exercise with people on your team will help you to get a shared understanding of what it is that you are really up to and what you want to achieve and what you need to achieve. So that was stretching the problem. The next, very briefly, brainstorming. I think one of the last times when I did this in a workshop, somebody told me, "Oh, Lukáš, you cannot say word brainstorming. It is so 1990s. Nobody does brainstorming anymore." And that's interesting. And I will not spend too much time on this because I believe you might be familiar with brainstorming. But just as a quick recap, brainstorming is an exercise when you define a problem or a question, for example, how to attract more guests to a club, and then you just put everybody can put any idea on the flip chart, or anybody can shout out any idea. No idea is bad. A lot of these ideas gets written down, and some of them might be useful. The disadvantage of this exercise, beside according to some it's so 1990s, it's also that it's very, let's say, it's very positive, very optimistic. And sometimes we, or at least I, tend to work with groups of people that are rather, let's say, skeptical, sometimes even cynical. And for them doing this exercise, it's, it's like play for children, and they do not get too excited about the prospect. Luckily, there's a variation of this exercise that positively attracts exactly this type of skeptical or cynical people, and that is, ta-da, reverse brainstorming, or the worst things that you could do. Now, speaking about guests, then you would define a question, how to scare guests away from your club as much as possible. And you can do this exercise on your own, but it's way more engaging when you are doing this way, at least in pair, but even more in a group. And then you allow people to really bring their dark side, to bring their most destructive ideas. And I think this plays, I think it plays actually on our hidden dark side that we have, and when we get permission to express it, we are super enthusiastic about it. So the idea of this exercise is just to let people come up with ideas how that will make the problem even worse, that will make, for example, guests in a meeting scare everyone away. And now I understand that you might have a question. Okay, so having a look at the board, there are so many ideas how to make it worse, but this is actually not going to help us. So clearly there is one more step that you need to do. And the one more step is to find the actions that are opposite to all the negative suggestions that you or your team brought. Switching back to Florian. Florian, did you get any, or do you think you can come up with any ideas how to make starting a corporate club take even longer time than it takes you now?
I can think of loads of things. I mean, the one thing I could think about is right at the lead, at the contact side, is don't reply to a request, basically. Don't reply to a request that's on Insightly, or delegate the request to someone that either is too inexperienced or just doesn't have the right mindset to talk with the corporate clubs. Because I mean, our membership is quite diverse, and some people are more familiar with the corporate world than others. Another thing I could think about is don't provide any guidance at all, which is like if people ask a question, how much does it cost? You're like, you would give them something very basic and then they figured everything out. I mean, I try to provide a spreadsheet, but I'm told that even that is not good enough, which is quite funny. What else? What else can I do? Don't follow up with people is another one, and don't try and structure the thing in a process type of way, which is structuring everything in processes is something I'm used to as a scientist, as an engineer, but as a club growth director, I've actually had to relearn the importance of this even more. It almost feels that the higher up you are in the leadership position, the more familiar you have to be with these things, which is quite interesting and does have some implications.
Right. Right, thanks. You have a lot of creative ideas. Maybe one thing that I would add to this exercise, so some of these things that you mentioned was, for example, don't provide any guidance or do not respond on the messages. This is a good approach. Would I suggest for even more, let's say, fun or even more creative engagement, try to, instead of saying don't do something, try to, and this is for everyone, try to say like what to do something that is definitely going to make it worse. So if I should give an example, don't assign anyone competent. Well, what you really can do is assign the most incompetent person in your Toastmaster club to deal with the corporation. Or speaking about don't provide any guidance how to start Toastmaster Club, what would be even, let's say, tougher, what could make it even worse would be provide misleading guidance, just to let the people work, let the people do some steps, and so that in the end they spend hours doing something that doesn't make any sense at all, that will lead them in a completely different path. But I think we got a couple of good ideas. So then the next step, Florian, for you would be thinking of, okay, what are the exact opposites? What are the exact opposite actions to the suggestions that you have provided? And I think if you provide just one or two examples to what we discussed, that would be fine.
Well, first off, I'll start with the contact is, well, you reply to people, I would say within 24 to 48 hours maximum. Strive to meet or have phone calls with them as well. And then in terms of providing guidance, try to provide guidance that is very comprehensive, but also not too detailed as to overwhelm the people into detail. So something that they can digest either stepwise or do one by one. But then I could play devil's advocate here, Lucas, and say, well,
go ahead,
because I'm actually facing this issue right now. I've got two people last week contacted Toastmasters saying we want to launch corporate clubs. I'm like, great. I've got I've got a luxury goods company that wants to launch a club. That's going to be amazing. But then I send an email to the person. I don't hear back. I send a WhatsApp message to the person. I don't hear back. So what can I do there? I mean, I cannot basically just jump in front of people. There are limitations. We're all human, but it's quite interesting. You can grease the wheels as much as you can, but there's still something you cannot control everything.
Oh, definitely. That's definitely true. You cannot start all the clubs yourself, right? And we can we can increase our chances, but that's all. And sometimes somebody just has an idea, I will start Toastmaster Club. This message reaches you. And in the meantime, that person loses interest and goes dancing salsa, or I don't know what could have happened.
Yeah.
Okay, reverse brainstorming. That was for reverse brainstorming. The next exercise, it's a brief one. It's called Clever Trevor. In fact, it's one of my favorites. And this exercise, well, the idea of the exercise is that sometimes what we really need is an outsider's perspective. When we are solving issues, even in Toastmasters, that we just need to get answer from a person who has no idea what is it that we are trying to do. For example, if you be speaking about how to promote our Toastmasters Club on Facebook, I would ask my taxi driver or my barber or my grandmother. And what this would bring is clearly, I think my grandma doesn't exactly know how Facebook works, and she doesn't know that much how our Toastmaster meetings work. But if I explain her the problem, she will be able to suggest me, she'll bring a completely new perspective that will not work with the same assumptions that I would have. So maybe, Florian, what I would like to ask you is, can you think of someone who is from a completely different field whom you could ask a simple question about your issues in club growth?
I could basically go 2 flights of stairs down and talk to my landlady about it. She's completely unfamiliar to Toastmaster. She's never worked in the corporate world. She's a teacher, and she's getting towards 85 now, so emails and all of that, she doesn't understand what it is. Having said that, in one instance before, she did give me a very good piece of wisdom. So that's an interesting.
Do you remember what it was? Now I'm interested.
I do. I basically was pretty much dumped by a lady, and I was started complaining to her, yeah, and then I showed her the conversation between me and her, because it was an email, Facebook message exchange, and she said to me, "You've been very blunt towards her," and it's not something that had occurred to me actually. That I was actually slightly blunt in the way I'd replied to a message, and I'm like, she's got a point actually, and eventually I was able to make amends, but it's quite interesting to the concept of getting someone completely different as a sounding board, because it's it sounds like I may have to go downstairs later this evening then.
Right, definitely go ahead. I'll make sure that we end the webinar on time, so you have a chance and you will not disturb the lady too late. And I like that you mentioned the term sounding board, because that's another benefit of doing this exercise. It's not just you that you get an answer from someone else, but just the fact that you are forced to state your problem in a way that an outsider, a person who is not from, let's say, Toastmaster community, so that even that person, even your landlady, would understand it, will help you clarify your thinking about a problem, and will help you come with additional solutions. So if you would like to try this out, here are the steps. Pick a random person to whom you will explain your problem, or the person doesn't need to be completely random, but it should be somebody outside Toastmasters when it's about club growth. Explain your problem and ask for suggestions. You will be surprised at the suggestions you will get. And the last exercise I have prepared for you today is super mentors. And the idea is a little bit similar to Clever Trevor, but while Clever Trevor was a real random person, the idea of the super mentor exercise is that sometimes what we need is another pair of eyes, but we can imagine that other pair of eyes. And with this exercise, what you need, it requires a little preparation, and you need to create but maybe it can be a team of your personal mentors. And they do not need to be real people whom you're meeting on day-to-day basis, but they might be, for example, historical figures or famous sportsmen, or whichever, I don't want to say celebrities, but let's say top achievers that you really admire, and whose perspective and advice you would welcome in a given situation. If I would share with you, well, the people that I would put into these positions. In my case, it would definitely be Arnold Schwarzenegger, the bodybuilder, actor, and politician. Just to give you an idea, I picked one quote to represent each of these super mentors. And Arnold Schwarzenegger, one of the traits that I really like about him is that for him, nothing is impossible. And he takes the effort to convince other people that nothing is impossible. The next one is Leonardo da Vinci, famous artist, painter, inventor. And one of the things I really liked about him was his approach to creativity. And I really love this quote. If the painter wishes to see beauties that charm him, it lies within his power to create them. So he spoke not about capturing reality as everyone else sees it, but how you can co-create reality. And the last one, Tim Ferriss, blogger, author, and podcaster. I really love this line. Whenever he's facing a problem, he asks himself, what would this look like if it were easy? Thinking of sometimes we are obsessing about a problem too much, trying to find a complicated, complex solution, whereas there might be just a very simple way. So these are my mentors and my imaginary mentors, and these quotations represent their thinking. But what this gives you is so that when you are solving a specific problem, their view will give you a different perspective on the problem. And when you ask yourself, okay, if I ask myself, how would Tim Ferriss promote clubs on Facebook if it was up to him and not up to me to do this? So, Florian, can you think of any person, real or unreal, who would qualify to as being your super mentor? And what would you ask them if you had to?
It's a tricky exercise, that one, Lucas, because some of the people I would want to ask are dead. So it's difficult to know what answers they would give me.
Right, true, yeah. But I mean, and again, great you've mentioned that. The approach how to do this, for example, if you're not sure what answer these people would give you. So if there are some that in general you admire and you think they are kind of cool, what you can do is you can study them a little bit. So maybe if they are very famous, you might have a look at their biography, or just look at how they tackle the problem. And by that, you just get an idea how that person reacts in a specific situation. And then you can use analogy and just really think, okay, what would the person do in this situation? So even if they are dead, if they left a trace on this earth, they might give you some ideas. Of course, all of this is a product of your imagination and creativity. And what really happens is all these mentors are just a tool to give you the creative spark and to build a connection that would not be there if you would not be thinking of them as your mentors. Questions or comments? Florian or anyone else? I think we do not have any questions. If you would like to follow up with this exercise, research. These are the steps. Step number 3, research the mentors so that you know what their opinions are and how they solved problems with their life. And then once you have done that, you can consult them on any problem that you have. And one more advantage this gives to you, it's just imagining it's somebody else giving you advice. It actually gives you more freedom of coming up with solutions that you might find may be silly for yourself, but if you think, okay, well, Arnold Schwarzenegger would say this, I would never say something like that, but Arnold Schwarzenegger would come with this and this idea, then this is really helpful because it gives you some extra ideas. So this was the creative problem-solving toolbox. So to recap, the first thing you need to do, center the problem, describe the ideal situation, look at what the issues are, and phrase the problem as, in what ways might I do this and this? Then stretch the problem, define a problem and ask yourself 5 times, why is this what you really want to do? Reverse brainstorming. If you get tired of just doing brainstorming, think of ways how you can make your problems even worse. If you were lost and do not know where to go next, ask somebody, ask a random person, try to define the question so that a random person understands your question and then ask a random person or your landlady. And the last word we discussed today was the super mentors. So think about 2, 3, 4, 5 people that you really admire, that you believe would give you an interesting perspective on the problems you're trying to solve. Study them a little bit or more, depends on how much deep you want to get into it. And then whenever you have an issue or problem, discuss it in your mind, discuss it with them and ask them, what would Arnold Schwarzenegger do if he were in my place? Last thing I would like to leave you with is, before we go to last comments and questions, sources. The first book I can recommend you is Improv Handbook. It goes very much into exercises of putting people relaxed, at ease, being spontaneous, which is very useful for leading any kind of creative sessions or problem-solving sessions. And the second one is Thinker Toys. That's where most of the tools that we discussed today are from. Website, my favorite, there are quite many online, but the reverse brainstorming I picked from mindtools.com. So if you're up for a deeper dive, these are the first places I recommend you to visit. And of course, if you'd like to find out more, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Florian, any last words?
Oops. No, it's a very interesting webinars, just like the previous version. And what I really, the key takeaway for me from all of this is one word: it's why. The word why is probably the most powerful, or the second most powerful word in the English language after you, because this is where we start to think, why do things happen that way? Why do things happen in a certain way? We sometimes really take a lot of things for granted, or we think things have always been happening that way, always been happening in a certain way, when actually this is not often the case. This is often not the case at all. There are alternatives, but they got embedded in, but why? And it's why is a very powerful word, and getting into the deep end of things. It's almost, I'm tempted to say, root cause analysis. And
True, it's a bit related.
It's very related, and this is where you can do some really interesting things. And the tools are highly transferable within Toastmasters. But I think there's a couple of comments there. So Liang from MLP London Bridge Speaker. Good evening, Liang said, how to get great ideas in the limited time of meetings. Sometimes I get not very useful ideas in the beginning of the discussion. When the great ideas comes out, we don't have much time left to discuss the solution. We don't have much time left to discuss more details for the great idea just being raised.
Right. Great question. I think the important thing, or Of course, you cannot completely control this, but how you can help this is the structure. And the exercises that we discussed today they are tools, and they can provide you with a structure, how to elicit ideas from others. Specifically, if you decide to use a combination of the exercises, of course, the sequence that we went through today is not necessarily, do not need to go through in this sequence. It's good, I think, as the first step to start with centering the problem, but besides that, you can go on any way you like. So that's the first, have the right structure, and the second is to make really people at ease with coming up with ideas, because when they get at ease, then they get more relaxed, and when people are more relaxed, they come up with more unusual or wild ideas when they're not afraid that they're going to be punished or ridiculed, that the suggestion that they give is not within the boundaries of a standard solution.
Do we have any more questions before we stop the webinar? Please keep them coming. This is a small group, so you can type a question or raise your hand by making a speak request on the hands up button. We've never tried that feature before, guys, so it would be great if someone could pioneer this feature of Webinar Jam today by making a speak request.
All right.
Come on. Who's gonna be breaking the ice of the speak request button? John, John, I know you want to do it. I know, yeah. Okay, so John, are you able to speak? I've granted the request to you. Doesn't seem to be working. Any final words or questions for us and Lucas, please? Oh. Okay, D, I've granted your speak request. Oh, I think people are leaving. Well, in that case, I just first off, thanks very, very, very much, Lucas, for presenting this. Oh, I can see. John, are you with us? So that's how it works. That's good to know.
Hello, John.
It's interesting. Either way. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's been a really interesting and a really wisening, dare I say, webinar. I've definitely learned a couple of things this evening. We will be having another webinar on Sunday, the 4th of March, by Jackie Rose and Wally Ososami on how to retain more members. This is renewal season at the moment. We've got the 20 to 20 renewal challenge in District 91. So the first club to renew 20 members gets some pizza, £50 worth of pizza. So if you want to know more about it, go and dial in on this webinar. I am pasting the link on the chat right now. I'm sure I'll see some of you very soon on the Toastmaster circuit in District 91 in London. Maybe not Rosie all the way in Australia. It's on my list of countries to visit, but sadly I haven't had the chance to go there. It's 9 o'clock London time. Hi, John.
Hi. I think I've...
Hi, John. You made it.
Yeah, I had to install an app to get online, And then I was wondering why you weren't hearing me, and I discovered my microphone wasn't turned on.
Okay.
So I've done that, and I turned the camera on for good measure as well. So
thank you for being our guinea pig this evening, because we never really tried this feature, and it's useful to know for future webinars potentially, and also potentially to have more than three presenters at the same time. So that's really, really useful. Thanks very much for doing this, John. How are things in Wales?
Pretty good.
Good.
And at the moment, I'm coming near the end of my Pathways Ambassador presentations with the Pathways Guide. And we're doing about 10 presentations in South and West Wales and the Southwest Peninsula of England.
That's
and
good.
The overwhelming response has been extremely good. So we're very heartened and lots of very interesting questions. And everybody seems to be really quite positive about it, which I think probably it's fair to say that 6 months ago people were not so positive. So maybe the date coming up is concentrating people's minds. But we're having a great time. I'm doing 2 more meetings this week, Gloucester speakers tomorrow and Southwest speakers in Exeter on Wednesday with Mike and with Grace Jones.
That's good.
That's going really quite nicely. And then
You're
that's
going to be
near the end. And then Mike's doing a load of webinars using Zoom, I think, to provide support for people.
That's great. So you're going to be driving up and down the M5 and the M4 quite a lot by the look of it.
Only the one meeting in Southwest Speakers, and when I went to Plymouth, there was a bad accident on the motorway, and I did about a 30-mile detour through the Devon countryside. And then when I came back, the motorway was also closed because of roadworks, so I had to divert off. But I got home about 1 o'clock in the morning, I think, because it's a good stonk from where I am down to Plymouth. But I have done it before when I was area director, so I knew what I was in for. And they remembered me, which was really nice.
Yeah, I mean, Lucas has got huge distances in his district when he has to fly to go to places like Kiev from Prague. We do have the same in District 91 in the far western regions, but this is really interesting to know. And Rosie in Australia probably may have to fly to go in between places as well. So it's quite interesting to compare Toastmasters experience all over the world.
I did.
Yeah, that's true.
Club in Plymouth, in New Plymouth in North Island, New Zealand, a few years ago. So that's a bit of a record, really. You can't go much further than that. And it was an excellent meeting. But thanks so much for that. I've done some work with a thing called Mastermind. I don't know if you've crossed that, which is going through a clarification state a problem, go through a clarification stage, and we found it worked best with about 8 people. And I took a problem to it, and I came away with 23 really good suggestions to help me solve the problem. But you have to do the clarification first, and then you go into problem solving and not letting one person have too much of a bite at it. So everybody gets their say. And I'm also involved with Young Enterprise with year 12, 17-year-olds in schools. And we do brainstorming. And yes, we do call it brainstorming. One of the reasons why not to call it brainstorming was because it would upset people with mental conditions. I think that was an urban myth, frankly. Reading is very, 1320. So I don't know why we read stuff anymore.
That's a good point.
This is all good stuff. It's 9 o'clock here in the United Kingdom, and I think 10 o'clock in the evening. Is it 10 or 11 for you, Lucas?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock in the evening in Prague. So I think we're going to call it off there. But thanks everyone for joining us, and have a really good night, and see you all on the road.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Have a good night.
Thanks, good night.
Florian.